When to eat for fat loss. Hey everybody, Dr. Mark Shankman back with you and the Obesity Project. Thank you for joining me once again. Today, episode 18, when to eat for fat loss. So I had a little dilemma when I started this video, and that was, should I talk about what to eat first, or should I talk about when to eat? And I decided when to eat was actually a little bit more important for various reasons, which we'll get into in a couple minutes. Because what to eat is actually a much, much longer discussion. And we'll get into various different diet plans and different ways of eating to enable people to lose weight. But I'm going to start with when. And so you've been told over the years to eat small meals throughout the day to lose weight. But what if I actually told you that that advice is what's actually making you fat? And science shows us that when you eat matters just as much as what you eat, maybe even more. And again, that's why I decided to start with when to eat. So here are some of the things that you'll learn in today's video. The biggest lies about meal frequency, how eating less can help you burn fat effortlessly, and why fasting is not starving yourself. And this is what is the common misconception, is that fasting is starving. So first, let's talk about the myth of frequent eating. So where did this idea originally come from? Well, conventional advice says to eat, 5 to 6 small meals a day to sort of quote unquote boost metabolism. But if you look back at the history and you look at where this conventional advice came from, it was generated by the food industry and snack companies that pushed this idea to sell more products. So, what actually happens to metabolism when we eat multiple times a day? So, let's talk about the truth about metabolism and what actually happens, the calorie out sort of equation, the truth about how we burn calories. So, eating often does not increase your metabolism. And each time you eat, particularly depending on what you eat, but even just when you eat, every time you eat, insulin spikes, signaling your body to store fat. And so this is ultimately the big problem with recommending people eat, multiple small meals a day. And this is common misconception that we were designed to eat multiple times a day. If we were designed to eat multiple times a day, we never would have survived as a species. That it was required for us to have periods where we ate and also periods where we didn't eat. And so really, when you look at it, more meals equals more insulin, which equals more fat storage. So this is not a helpful thing. So let's take a quick reality check. So before the 1970s, people ate 3 meals a day. They ate no snacks, and obesity was absolutely rare. And so what happened after the 70s, in 1977, with the Food Pyramid, Department of Agriculture, and the dietary recommendations that were made by the US government? Well, snacking culture exploded, and so did obesity. So that's not the answer. The answer is not eating more often. So let's talk about the power of fasting. As you can see behind me here and here, we're talking a little bit about intermittent fasting today. And this is more about when to eat. So we're going to talk about the power of fasting and meal timing. So how does fasting work? And so what happens is after you eat, insulin stays elevated for several hours. But when you fast, that gives time for your insulin levels to slowly drop. And this then allows your body to burn stored fat that you have in your fat cells and your wiggly jiggly subcutaneous and visceral fat as well. So here are some of the benefits of fasting. Lowers insulin levels, as I mentioned, increases fat burning. So if the insulin levels are high, it is absolutely impossible for you to burn your fat stores. Insulin must be allowed to come down for those fat stores to be utilized as energy. It also, fasting helps regulate appetite naturally. And, the one thing that you have to remember about hunger, and this is, kind of people forget this. You kind of know it, but you sort of forget it too, is that hunger is fleeting. Hunger is temporary. If you don't eat after you're hungry, the hunger actually goes away. And so, like, think about one of those days where, it's sort of around lunchtime, you're at work, you're starting to get hungry, you're starting to think about what you're going to eat for lunch, and then you get super busy, you get caught up, and all of a sudden 2, 3 hours goes by and you realize you didn't eat. And what happened? Did you stay hungry? Did your hunger increase? Did it blow you out of the water and you pretty much couldn't even focus on work? You had to, kind of go back and get something to eat? No, the hunger passed and you were distracted, and then the hunger, relieved itself naturally. So one of the other things that fasting can do is can improve insulin sensitivity and reverse type 2 diabetes, which is super important. So let's address this sort of notion of, is fasting a form of starvation? And I would contend that no, fasting is not starvation. Fasting is controlled, intentional meal timing. So your body isn't shutting down, it's simply switching fuel sources. So fasting is simply a time sequence, or eating and fasting windows of time, right? So let's talk about the 16-8 sort of version. Now you can do any kind of intermittent fasting you want, but let's use one of the more common ones, either the 18-6 or the 16-8. And that's, you maybe eat at noon for the first time during the day, and you wrap up about 8 o'clock. So you've got that 8 hour window, and the rest of the day, the evening, overnight, and the morning, you're actually fasting and you're allowing your insulin levels to come down. You're switching your body from a sugar burning mode to a fat burning mode because you allowed that insulin to drop. Everything is dictated by insulin. Insulin is the hormone that controls what your body does with calories and with storage or energy as it's coming in, and also as far as storage. So let's talk about the truth about breakfast. So this one just really kills me. I've mentioned this in another video, but this is the biggest sort of bamboozle that anybody has ever pulled on an entire population. So, of course, everybody's heard the term breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Well, where did that phrase come from? And the reality is it was created by food companies such as Kellogg's and General Mills. And there was absolutely no evidence that skipping breakfast caused weight gain. This was simply a marketing ploy by food companies that wanted to promote breakfast cereals and breakfast foods. So studies have actually shown just the reverse, just the opposite, that skipping breakfast, one, does not slow down metabolism, that two, many people feel less hungry later in the day when they skip breakfast, and that eating breakfast is fine, but not mandatory. So here's a better approach. And this is what Dr. Jason Fung typically recommends. And as I mentioned yesterday, I'm a big believer in Dr. Fung's work, and he is sort of the godfather of intermittent fasting as well. Is that as far as breakfast goes, eat when you're actually hungry, not because of old school advice. So eat when you feel like you want some food. And if you're simply not hungry, then skip the meal. Super easy. So, how do we use meal timing to increase fat loss or increase weight loss. So first thing you got to do is you got to stop eating every few hours. We've got to cut out those unnecessary snacks and let the insulin levels drop between our meals. And then to keep those windows pure, we've got to avoid late night eating when insulin sensitivity is actually lower at night. So you've got to avoid late night eating. If you eat from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, your window is super small and you never give the insulin a chance to come down. So you can try several different eating windows. I mentioned the 6 to 8, but you can do a 12-12 where you eat within a 12-hour window and then fast for 12 hours. Super easy to do. You're just basically pushing your breakfast back just a little bit and making sure you don't do those late night snacks. You can do what I've actually been doing for probably about 2 years now. I've been doing intermittent fasting, and uh, you can do a 16-8. I kind of tried to shrink that just a little bit more. I do kind of more of an 18-6, but the typical 16-8, where you fast for 16 hours and eat within an 8-hour window, so maybe that 12 to 8. I typically do about 12 to 6 p.m. Depends on what time I get home from work. Sometimes I'm home by 5 and I eat by 6 o'clock and done eating by 6. But a lot of times I might not get home till 6 or even 6:15. And by the time I'm done eating, it's, about 7 p.m. So that's a 7-hour window. But I would say I'm usually typically in that 16-8 to 18-6 sort of window. There's also something called OMAD, where it basically, the OMAD stands for 1 meal a day, which is sort of an advanced fat loss strategy. So 1 meal a day basically is sort of a 24-hour, really technically a 23-hour um, fast, but you're essentially doing one meal. So many people, the one meal is dinner. Dinner is certainly a more important meal from a social standpoint. So typically people are much more social. They eat with their family or they eat with friends, and it's much more of a social engagement as well as an opportunity to gain sustenance. But a little bit harder to give up dinner than it is to give up breakfast or to give up lunch. So, so some of the best ways that you can actually structure your meals, you can do 2 meals a day, lunch and dinner, which creates that kind of shorter eating window. And again, most people lunch and dinner are the two main meals that they're going to eat. And then you want to focus on whole, unprocessed foods when you do eat. So what you actually eat to break the fast is almost as important, maybe even a little bit more important than the number of hours that you go without eating. So really, really important to when you do break the fast, that you break it with protein, you break it with fat. If you're going to do carbs, that's okay too, but make sure they're whole, not refined, not processed foods, your whole fruits and vegetables. And so intermittent fasting is a super easy way to lower those insulin levels, allow some fat burning. And here's the other thing, many diets, like I mentioned to you guys, if you've been watching my recent videos, that I'm about to start the carnivore diet. And I did go out last weekend to Costco and bought a whole bunch of meats, preparing myself for this carnivore transition. And let's just say that Costco trip was not cheap. It was not inexpensive. And eating carnivore, there's ways to eat carnivore more inexpensively, but in general, carnivore, I would say, is definitely a little bit more of an expensive diet. However, the beauty of intermittent fasting is it's completely free. It is free, it is super convenient, and really the easiest, simplest thing that you can do. And one of the things that I mentioned in the beginning, but I actually just realized now that I failed to mention, we talked about how um, going long periods of time without a meal, without eating, without nutrition or nutrients coming in, was believed to, or multiple times a day was believed to increase the metabolic rate, and that certainly is not true. But one of the things that most people talk about when they talk about intermittent fasting and it sort of makes some sort of common sense, is that you're starving yourself and you're not actually getting energy, and your basal metabolic rate will slow. And that could not be the furthest thing from the truth. So think about nature. Think about in the wild. You've got a wolf that hasn't eaten in 2 days, and that wolf is hungry, it is focused, and it is deadly. You want to be facing the wolf that just ate a meal because they're not interested in you. They're not licking their lips. But the wolf that is hungry, the wolf that hasn't eaten, is focused and ready to pounce. So if the basal metabolic rate went down from fasting, then that wolf would have no energy, and it would be highly unlikely to actually be able to catch its prey and eat again. And essentially, that would be a situation where every minute that goes by, that wolf or that predator would lose energy moment by moment and be much less likely to catch its prey and would die. So our bodies actually go the opposite direction. When we fast, our basal metabolic rate actually goes up. It doesn't go up by tremendous amounts, but about 10% or so. And there's a ton of energy released into our blood. So we release blood sugar, either released from fat stores or released from glycogen from our liver. And this provides the nutrition and the energy that we need to get our next meal. And so our basal metabolic rate actually goes up with intermittent fasting. This has been proven in many research studies, and it can be directly measured. So eating often does not increase your basal metabolic rate. Actually, it could have the opposite effect, or at least stay stable. But intermittent fasting absolutely does increase your basal metabolic rate so that you have the energy you need to then get your next meal. So intermittent fasting is free. It's certainly convenient. You don't have to worry about, like, if you're trying to think of what to eat for breakfast, but you're trying to eat healthy, you're trying to eat whole foods, you're trying to stay away from refined carbohydrates and processed carbohydrate, then intermittent fasting is the super easiest, quickest, most convenient thing that you could possibly do. So here are a couple final thoughts when it comes to intermittent fasting and when to eat, not just the fasting. So one, as I mentioned, eating 6 times a day does not speed up metabolism. Two, skipping meals helps burn fat by lowering those insulin levels. And then, of course, three, fasting is a natural way to break the cycle of obesity and insulin resistance. So, have you ever tried fasting or meal timing? And what was your experience? Drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear what your experience with intermittent fasting or timed meal planning. And do you think that skipping breakfast would work for you? Is that something that is doable? Do you wake up hungry, or do you generally not wake up hungry? Feel free to drop that comment below as well. And of course, if you found this helpful, please share this with someone who still believes that eating all day helps with weight loss. They need to be informed, they need to be updated, and they need to become, more enlightened and educated. So thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please like, share, and comment. Drop those comments below that I asked about. And I will see you in the next video. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. I'll catch you next week. Take care.